From violent termination to transnational repression, Tencent Empire's desperate endgame, exposing the shocking cover-up behind Tencent and Ma Huateng's suppression of a whistleblower. I am a Tencent whistleblower. I am a former senior engineer who worked at Tencent for 7 years. I was terminated after I submitted real-name reports to Tencent's anti-fraud department and to Ma Huateng regarding major internal corruption. Tencent's stated reason for firing me was that I allegedly worked fewer than 8 hours per day. Tencent is a company whose ADRs trade in the United States. By allegedly concealing internal corruption and firing me, a whistleblower, Tencent and Ma Huateng have seriously violated U.S. securities law. This is not an ordinary labor dispute. This is not a complaint by a former employee against his old employer, nor is this just another layoff story from China's internet industry, briefly consumed by online traffic and then forgotten. This is the full story of an internal Tencent whistleblower who, over the course of 7 years, was continuously retaliated against by a global technology giant, smeared through media narratives, framed through surveillance evidence, suppressed by the judicial system, intimidated by local police power, and finally, after arriving in the United States and continuing to disclose evidence to the global public and international markets, pursued through transnational litigation. From 2019 to 2026, Tencent and Ma Huateng's campaign against me has never stopped. On the surface, Tencent packaged everything as a labor contract dispute, an employee attendance issue, and an ordinary case involving a former employee who allegedly refused to obey management. But the truth is the exact opposite. I was not fired because of so-called failure to work 8 hours per day. I was removed because I submitted real-name reports to Tencent's anti-fraud department and to Ma Huateng regarding major internal corruption, touching the darkest, most sensitive, and most carefully hidden chain of interests inside Tencent. Tencent was not afraid of my attendance record. Tencent was afraid of the evidence in my hands. Tencent was afraid that I had proved that the anti-fraud system, whistleblower protection mechanism, internal control framework, and ESG governance narrative it had long promoted to the outside world could all fail at the most critical moment. What Tencent fears even more is that, as a TCEHY-related company closely watched by global capital markets, if it is proven to have long concealed internal corruption, retaliated against a real-name whistleblower, manipulated media narratives, and used the judicial system to suppress a whistleblower, then this is no longer merely a domestic Chinese labor dispute. It becomes an explosive convergence of corporate governance risk, internal control risk, securities disclosure risk, and political risk. For Americans and global investors, the real importance of this story is this. Tencent is not an ordinary Chinese company. Tencent is a super platform company that owns WeChat, gaming, payments, advertising, cloud services, fintech, and a global investment portfolio. It controls critical infrastructure within China's digital life and is regarded by many global investors as a core asset of China's digital economy. If a company like this can suppress an internal whistleblower for 7 years, erase corruption from its corporate governance narrative, use surveillance footage to frame the whistleblower, cause media reports to be deleted, have courtroom threats written into official hearing transcripts, and continue to sue through Chinese courts after the whistleblower has arrived in the United States, then global investors must ask one fundamental question again. What exactly are you buying? A normal technology company? Or a Chinese-style capital empire capable of mobilizing public relations, media, courts, and local power structures to suppress the truth? Tencent did not deal with corruption. It dealt with the person who reported corruption. Tencent has long claimed publicly that it values anti-fraud enforcement, emphasizes red lines, promotes a culture of integrity, and protects whistleblowers. But my experience shows that when real internal interest groups are touched, this rhetoric may be nothing more than a public relations shell. In December 2018, I submitted a real-name report to Tencent's anti-fraud department regarding major corruption. The core issue was that internal Tencent R&D personnel were allegedly participating on a large scale in external companies, creating serious conflicts of interest and violating Tencent's own so-called red lines. This was not an ordinary workplace disagreement. This was not a minor argument between colleagues. This was a major incident involving Tencent's internal controls, benefit transfers, management protection, whistleblower protection, and the authenticity of corporate governance. Even more seriously, this was not the first time the issue had surfaced. As early as 2016, Tencent's anti-fraud department had already investigated related problems, and multiple individuals involved had already been exposed. Yet Tencent's senior management did not thoroughly clean up the corruption chain. Instead, it chose to cool the matter down, conceal it, and allow relevant personnel to remain in their positions. The people who were actually reported were not thoroughly removed. They continued to receive high salaries, continued to lead teams, and continued to remain in key positions. I, the real-name whistleblower, became the first person to be dealt with. In January 2019, I wrote a real-name whistleblower letter directly to Ma Huateng. Ma Huateng personally replied, saying that the company would handle the matter seriously and carefully. But what was the final result? Corruption was not liquidated. The whistleblower was liquidated. In March 2019, Tencent suddenly issued a notice terminating my employment contract. To manufacture a reason for the termination, Tencent retrieved and used 32 consecutive days of surveillance footage aimed in the direction of my workstation, twisting the normal work activities of a senior engineer into the allegation that I had not been on duty for 8 hours per day. I reported internal corruption. They investigated my workstation. I reported problems to Ma Huateng in my real name. They put me under camera surveillance for 32 days. I demanded that the company protect whistleblowers. They kicked the whistleblower out. This is what Tencent's anti-fraud system looks like in a real case. Its so-called red lines could not restrain real internal corruption, but they could be used to strangle the person who exposed it. Its so-called whistleblower protection did not protect the whistleblower. It protected the interest groups being reported. Its so-called serious and careful handling did not deal with the problem. It dealt with the person who raised the problem. 2. The essence of the Tencent surveillance brother case is the capital framing of a whistleblower. In July 2020, my labor dispute with Tencent shocked China. It surged onto trending lists on Weibo, Toutiao, Baidu, and other platforms. A large number of media outlets and official accounts across China reposted the story. What the outside world saw was the headline that a senior Tencent engineer had been laid off for working fewer than 8 hours per day. I later became known as Tencent Surveillance Brother. But behind that label was one of Tencent's most absurd, cold-blooded, and symbolically revealing methods of capital-driven framing. Tencent's core evidence consisted of 8-hour surveillance videos, recorded from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day, aimed in the direction of my workstation. Tencent then used those 8-hour videos to demand proof that I had been at my workstation for a full 8 hours each day. This was absurd in itself. Those 8 hours included lunch breaks, bathroom use, drinking water, meetings, training, laboratory testing, conference room discussions, reporting to supervisors, cross-building communication, and all other normal human activities. Under Tencent's logic, as long as I left my workstation, I could be counted as not on duty. Going to a meeting did not count as being on duty. Attending training did not count as being on duty. Going to the laboratory to test software did not count as being on duty. Going to the pantry did not count as being on duty. Going to lunch did not count as being on duty. Even going to the bathroom could be counted as not being on duty. If this logic holds, then Tencent employees are not human beings. They are machines nailed to chairs. A senior engineer no longer proves his value by solving problems, writing code, performing tests, attending meetings, or completing projects. He proves his loyalty by whether his body remains glued to a chair. This is not attendance management. This is humiliation. This is not management. This is framing. Tencent usually claims to operate under a flexible working system. It claims that internet companies encourage employees to arrange their own time, focusing on results and efficiency. But when it needed to fire a whistleblower, flexible work suddenly disappeared and became prison-style workstation attendance. Normally, there was no unified attendance check. At the moment of termination, Tencent suddenly invented camera-based attendance. Normally, employees were encouraged to attend meetings, collaborate across buildings, conduct tests, and communicate. At the moment of termination, Tencent recognized only the image of a person sitting at a workstation. Normally, Tencent relied on employees working late at night to generate profits. In litigation, however, it selected only videos from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., erasing from the narrative the real overtime work after 6 p.m. This is Tencent's most dangerous and most cunning feature. It is not that Tencent has no rules. It is that the rules serve capital at any moment. When the company needs employees to sacrifice themselves, the rule is called flexible dedication. When the company needs to eliminate an employee, the rule becomes workstation imprisonment. 3. 32 days of surveillance framing. Cameras became Tencent's weapon for removing a whistleblower. Ordinary companies manage employees through attendance systems, performance evaluations, work results, communication records, and management procedures. Tencent is different. Tencent aimed cameras at a whistleblower's workstation for 32 consecutive days, then selectively extracted, organized, and calculated the footage, turning every minute the employee left his seat into an accusation. This was not normal labor management. This was premeditated surveillance framing. The most absurd part of this operation is that Tencent did not provide complete 24-hour surveillance footage, did not provide access control records, did not provide office building entrance and exit records, did not provide complete evidence from meeting rooms, laboratories, cafeterias, pantries, or cross-building work areas. Instead, it provided only partial footage aimed in the direction of my workstation. Tencent provided only the fragments favorable to itself. It did not provide footage of overtime after 6 p.m. It did not provide records of possible weekend work. It did not provide complete access control data, showing employees entering and leaving the office building. It did not provide complete evidence capable of proving the full reality of my work. It simply took a sliced-up fragment of the picture and demanded that the court believe this was the whole truth. Even more seriously, the videos themselves had major problems, including interruptions, discontinuities, abnormal file timestamps, poor clarity, and inability to reflect the real date or complete work status. Tencent used this seriously flawed electronic data as the core evidence for firing a whistleblower, and the Chinese courts chose to believe Tencent. This pushed the entire case into a far more frightening dimension. When a capital giant can selectively provide surveillance clips, and a court can selectively accept those clips, any employee can be framed. Today it is me. Tomorrow it could be any Tencent employee. As long as you offend an internal interest group, report corruption, or touch secrets that senior management does not want the outside world to know, the camera can become a noose, the workstation can become a cage, and electronic data can become a knife in the hands of capital. TCEHY, Nanshan always wins is not a joke. It is the reality of capital manipulating the judiciary. Tencent has long been known in China as Nanshan always wins. In the past, many people treated it as an internet joke. My experience tells the world that it is not a joke. From labor arbitration to the first trial, second trial, and retrial, Tencent controlled the narrative at every stage. The core finding in the arbitration in court documents consistently revolved around the so-called attendance issue, the alleged failure to work 8 hours per day, and the alleged serious violation of labor discipline. The key evidence supporting that finding was Tencent's daily 8-hour workstation surveillance footage. Tencent later tried to shift the focus in its public relations narrative, attempting to portray the case as involving a complete chain of evidence, other disciplinary violations, or a management dispute. But the judgments and rulings themselves show that the real core was attendance, alleged failure to work 8 hours per day, and workstation surveillance video. Tencent dared not admit this directly, because once it admits it, the whole world will see the absurdity of the logic. A Chinese internet giant long associated with 996 work culture, flexible work arrangements, and heavy reliance on employees working late. Into the night used workstation surveillance. Footage from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. to fire a senior engineer who had made a real-name corruption report on the ground that he had not sat at his workstation for 8 full hours. This is no longer an ordinary legal issue. It is an insult to the basic dignity of labor. It is also an insult to judicial credibility. What is even more shocking is that the courts did not seriously examine the completeness, authenticity, relevance, and probative value of Tencent's evidence. They did not sufficiently examine the nature of a senior engineer's work. They did not genuinely investigate the real background of Tencent's long-standing, flexible working system and overtime culture. Instead, they accepted Tencent's absurd logic that work means sitting at a workstation. This means that, in the face of capital, common sense can disappear. Labor law can be distorted. Evidence rules can be twisted. A senior engineer can be judged as if he were a factory line machine, and the core fact of corruption reporting can be erased from the case. That is the real horror of Nanshan always wins. It is not merely that Tencent always wins. It is that Tencent can bend the entire rule system in the direction it wants. Tencent does not only control traffic, it controls silence. Many American investors may underestimate Tencent's true power. Tencent is not merely a gaming company. Tencent is not merely a social platform. Tencent is not merely an advertising and fintech company. Tencent possesses enormous media influence, public relations networks, platform relationships, and the ability to shape public opinion. In 2020, my case surged onto national trending lists, creating massive public attention in a short period of time. People across China were asking how a senior Tencent engineer could be fired for supposedly working fewer than 8 hours per day. The topic should have led to further questions. Why did Tencent use workstation surveillance to fire an employee? Why did Tencent refuse to acknowledge its flexible working system? Why was the employee's real work content ignored? Why was a real-name anti-corruption whistleblower ultimately fired? But what Tencent does best is removing the truly dangerous questions from public discussion. The media could report on the labor dispute, but they could not touch the anti-corruption report. The media could discuss the allegation of being on duty for fewer than 8 hours, but they could not dig into the fact that I had written a whistleblower letter to Ma Huateng. The media could quote Tencent's public relations language, but they could not investigate the internal corruption chain at Tencent. The media could consume the Tencent surveillance brother label, but they could not restore the truth of how the whistleblower was removed. On December 17, 2021, TCEHY Daily published a report by journalist Zhang Jingjing about my case, with a headline involving Tencent firing a 41-year-old employee for insufficient on-duty time and being sued for more than RMB 12 million. TCEHY Daily is part of the Henan Daily Group, a legitimate media outlet. Its interview and report should have been protected. But after the report was published, Tencent's public relations machine moved quickly, and the article soon encountered deletion and disappeared from the internet. A single internet giant was able to make a report by a legitimate media outlet rapidly disappear. What does this show? It shows that Tencent is not merely a company. It is also a public opinion black hole. Content involving Tencent layoffs can be throttled. Content involving Tencent anti-corruption reports can be deleted. Content involving Ma Huateng's knowledge can be diluted. Core facts involving Tencent's internal corruption can be erased from public narrative. This is the real form of platform power in China's internet system. So-called internet supervision can end up becoming an internet silencer. So-called media reporting can end up becoming fragments screened by capital. So-called public discussion can end up reduced to only the version Tencent is willing to let you see. VI. From deleted reports and online blackouts to police at my door. The shadow of a Tencent-style 251 incident. If Tencent had only deleted reports and throttled traffic, that would already have been frightening enough. But my experience went far beyond that. In January 2020, I was in a restaurant in Shenzhen being interviewed by the Financial Times, preparing to tell overseas media the truth behind Tencent's internal corruption, the retaliation against a whistleblower, and the labor dispute. About 20 minutes into the interview, a call came from the local police station. They accused me of spreading statements about Tencent's violent layoffs and warned me not to speak recklessly and not to accept interviews from foreign media. The next day, 2 police officers came to my door. They had no formal legal document, no summons, and no clear legal basis. They merely said the municipal bureau had received intelligence that I was spreading information online about Tencent's violent layoffs, and then delivered a threatening warning. I challenged them on the spot. Shenzhen police had just created the Huawei 251 incident. Are you now trying to create a Tencent version of 251? This was the key moment when the Tencent case escalated from a corporate dispute into intimidation backed by public power. Why would an ordinary employee, a real-name whistleblower, and a citizen being interviewed by foreign media be warned by the police simply for discussing Tencent's violent layoffs? Why did the police intervene shortly after the foreign media interview began? Why did officers come to my door the next day? Without a deep linkage between a giant corporation's power and local state resources, it is hard for any ordinary person to believe such intimidation could be so precise, so rapid, and so effective. This was not normal corporate crisis management. This was the use of public power to help a corporation silence a whistleblower. This pushed a Tencent whistleblower's right to speak, right to defend himself, and basic sense of personal safety into fear. For Americans and global investors, this point is especially critical. This is not an ordinary public relations controversy involving a Chinese company. It concerns whether a global platform company can mobilize local public power to intimidate a whistleblower who is attempting to disclose internal problems to foreign media. This has already entered the realm of transnational information, suppression, and human rights risk. 7. Court bailiffs and coercive measures. Tencent's gag chain entered the judicial record. An even more absurd and colder scene occurred inside the courtroom, in my labor dispute case against Tencent, in which I sought unpaid overtime compensation and year-end bonus payments. I attended what should have been an ordinary civil labor dispute proceeding. The first instance hearing at the Nanshan District Court in August 2021, and the second instance hearing at the Shenzhen Intermediate People's Court in April 2022. Yet I received extremely unusual courtroom treatment. Court bailiffs were deployed at the courtroom entrance. During the hearing, bailiffs sat inside the courtroom and watched me. This was not a criminal case. It was not a violent case. It was not a public security case. It was merely a labor dispute. Why would a former Tencent employee, a real-name whistleblower, and a person asserting his rights in a labor case be treated this way? The most shocking moment occurred during the 2022 hearing at the Shenzhen Intermediate People's Court. The presiding judge reprimanded me in court and entered the content into the official hearing transcript. The court explicitly stated that it had seen my online posts and warned that if I continued to speak online, the court would take coercive measures against me. In the Chinese legal context, the words coercive measures can mean summons by force, detention, or even more severe forms of personal restraint. Tencent's attorney responded in court that he understood and then signed the transcript. This was not ordinary judicial language. This was a gag threat written into an official court record, a technology company, and the courtroom formed a suffocating kind of tacit alignment. The court used the threat of coercive measures to warn a rights claimant to stop speaking online, and Tencent's lawyer received that message in court. This means that capital's demands entered judicial language. It means a corporation's goal of silencing. A whistleblower borrowed the shadow of state coercive power. It means a whistleblower was no longer facing merely a company, but a pressure system composed of the company, media, public relations, the judiciary, and local resources. This is the most terrifying truth of the Tencent case. Tencent was not merely fighting a labor lawsuit. Tencent was using an entire system to retaliate against a whistleblower. Faith. From repression in China to transnational litigation. Tencent reaches into the United States. Then came December 30th, 2025. I posted on Weibo and exposed the two cards Tencent and Ma Huateng least wanted the public to discuss. First, Tencent was allegedly transferring and parking more than 1 trillion RMB in assets into overseas offshore structures. Second, over the years, Ma Huateng had allegedly cashed out and extracted personal wealth through share disposals, dividends in specie, and other mechanisms, reaching a scale of more than 80 billion Hong Kong dollars. This time, Tencent reacted with extraordinary speed. Around January 4, 2026, Tencent rapidly initiated evidence collection. On January 6, 2026, a complaint bearing the corporate seals of Tencent-related companies was already filed with the Shenzhen court. This was not ordinary rights protection. This was the rapid activation of a crisis machine. Why was Tencent so fast? Why was it in such a hurry? Why, after I exposed Tencent's trillion RMB offshore asset structure and Ma Huateng's massive personal cash extraction, did Tencent immediately swing the litigation weapon? The reason is simple. Tencent is not afraid of me as an individual. It is afraid of this chain of evidence. It is afraid global investors will see it. It is afraid international media will see it. It is afraid the Chinese public will see it. It is afraid regulators will see it. It is afraid that the ESG image, tech for good image, gentle and compliant image, and employee care image that Tencent has long packaged for the outside world will be peeled away layer by layer, revealing the real structure underneath. Internal corruption, whistleblower retaliation, media suppression, judicial intimidation, asset offshoring, and the founder's personal wealth extraction. More importantly, I was already in the United States. Tencent's lawsuit was not simply aimed at a party to a labor dispute inside China. It was an attempt through a Chinese court to exert pressure on a whistleblower who had already arrived in the United States and continued to disclose information to the global public and international capital markets. This already bears clear characteristics of transnational repression. A global technology giant was using the Chinese judicial system to continue pressuring a former employee and whistleblower located in the United States, seeking deletion, blocking, disconnection of information, dissemination, and punishment for his public expression. This is not normal reputation protection. This is cross-border silencing. It is a dangerous signal that Chinese-style platform power and judicial pressure are being extended onto American soil. Sign, Tencent's core problem is no longer a labor dispute. It is a global capital markets risk. Many people still believe that my case against Tencent is merely a labor dispute. That is the version Tencent most wants global investors to believe. But the truth is far beyond that. I reported major internal corruption at Tencent. I exposed the failure of Tencent's anti-fraud mechanism. I demonstrated that a whistleblower was retaliated against. I possess the factual chain showing that Ma Huateng personally received the real-name whistleblower report, yet the whistleblower was ultimately not protected. I possess the factual chain showing that Ma Huateng personally received the real-name whistleblower report, yet the whistleblower was ultimately not protected. I experienced Tencent's systematic siege. against an internal whistleblower through surveillance, evidence manipulation, public relations, media pressure, courts, and police intimidation. What does this mean for a giant platform? Company closely watched by global capital markets? It means there may be major deficiencies in internal controls. It means corporate governance may have seriously failed. It means management may bear inescapable responsibility for major corruption issues and retaliation against a whistleblower. It means Tencent's long-standing external image of compliance, ESG responsibility, social responsibility, employee protection, and anti-fraud red lines may be materially misleading. It means what global investors see may be only a carefully polished surface created by Tencent. The real Tencent may be a capital beast that can allow corrupt actors to remain, drive out a whistleblower, use 32 days of surveillance to frame an employee, make media reports disappear, send police to a whistleblower's door, have coercive measures written into a court transcript, and continue to use litigation to suppress speech across borders after the whistleblower is already in the United States. This is not ordinary corporate risk. This is corporate governance risk. This is internal control risk. This is securities disclosure risk. This is political risk. This is human rights risk. This is transnational repression risk. More importantly, it is a structural risk that global capital markets must re-examine. The questions Americans and global investors must ask. American investors and global investors should not only ask whether Tencent's gaming revenue has recovered. They should not only ask whether its advertising business is growing. They should not only ask whether its AI investment is effective. They should not only ask whether the WeChat ecosystem remains stable. The real questions they should ask are these. Has Tencent long concealed internal corruption and whistleblower retaliation? Has Tencent fully disclosed its internal control and corporate governance risks to global investors? Does Tencent have the capability and history of using public relations and media influence to suppress unfavorable information? Has Tencent used the judicial system and local resources to attack an internal whistleblower? After receiving a real-name report, did Ma Huateng fail to truly protect the whistleblower? Has Tencent used Chinese courts to exert cross-border pressure on a whistleblower located in the United States? Are Tencent's narratives about ESG governance, employee protection, anti-fraud systems, and tech for good merely capital market packaging? Are investors in Tencent TCEHY underestimating political and governance risks that go far beyond any financial model? These are the issues global investors truly need to focus on. Because in China, the risks of platform giants often do not erupt linearly. They erupt institutionally. Once political risk, regulatory risk, public opinion risk, and capital markets risk overlap, valuation may not decline gradually. It may be repriced suddenly. Conclusion. This is not one person's war. This is a window through which global investors can understand Tencent's real governance risk. This is a case study in how Chinese platform capital treats internal whistleblowers. This is a case study in how Nanshan Always Wins operates. This is a case study in how capital can destroy an individual through surveillance, media, public relations, courts, and local resources. It is also a case study for Americans seeking to understand the real risks of Chinese technology giants. Tencent once tried to define me through surveillance footage, but what was truly recorded by the surveillance was not my workstation time. It was Tencent's own governance black hole. Tencent once tried to use an attendance issue to cover up whistleblower retaliation, but after 7 years, the chain of facts has become increasingly complete. Tencent once tried to use public relations, statements to cover up internal corruption, but every deleted report, every suppressed interview, every blocked post, and every coercive measures, warning written into the transcript will become historical evidence. Tencent cannot wash away. Tencent once tried to remove me from the company, remove the truth from the internet, and remove the whistleblower from public memory. But they underestimated one thing. A Tencent whistleblower pushed to the edge, holding evidence, having seen the true face of the capital machine, and no longer afraid of their lawsuits. Surveillance, deleted reports, intimidation, and siege is no longer merely a former employee. He becomes the witness Tencent fears most. From internal corruption to surveillance framing, from media suppression to police intimidation, from judicial silencing to transnational litigation, from trillion RMB asset offshoring to Ma Huateng's massive wealth extraction, the line has now connected. The more aggressively Tencent and Ma Huateng retaliate, the more they prove to Americans, global investors, and international media that what they truly fear has never been rumor. What they fear is the truth itself.